So it is June of 2020, and I am getting into bed with my wife. And this feeling of exhaustion and disgust just falls over me. And I look at my wife and I say, I can't do this anymore. I'm miserable. And she reaches over and she puts her hand on top of me and she says, you've been miserable for a really long time. I think you need to leave. Now, we're not talking about my marriage. That was awesome. But we are talking about my 25-year career as an entrepreneur in the recruiting and staffing industry. And I had spent years facing something that just was completely broken. I was just tired of how the industry used people as product, and I couldn't be complicit in that anymore. And I was really clear that recruiting is broken. So let's just look a little. And when we look at the landscape of recruiting, everybody's freaking miserable. 76% of hiring managers say their biggest concern is finding the right people for their teams. And about 72% of recruiters say their biggest challenge is filling their open positions. And about 72% of job seekers report that the job seeking process causes them an extraordinary amounts of stress. And when I talk to CEOs, the average turnover rate after for new hires is about 20%. But most CEOs I talk to admit that another 20% of the people that they hire don't really work out and really shouldn't be there. So we have everybody involved in this situation who is absolutely miserable. It's a pretty clear sign that it's broken. And what's more is we are entering into a world of really significant shortages of labor. All right, boomers are leaving the marketplace, and there is not enough of us to replace them. Yeah, so we are entering into a very difficult time, although a lot of us are worried about the economy for the next 12 months or so. Even beyond that, the hiring will continue to be a problem. So we have this broken system. What is it that's broken? One, employers start looking for people after they realize they need to hire. Yeah, so immediately they are desperate to hire. They're motivated buyers, and they're not clear on what they're looking for. So how many of you have taken a job where you've seen a job description and you walked in the door and it ain't nothing like that? There's very little thought. And those of you who have hired people, when you write a job description, 90% of people who do that, they just get the old job description and then they bring it to the new one. Yeah, but that doesn't work because things are changing way too fast for that to make that effect. And most people who are interviewing don't know how to interview. So they don't know what they're looking for. And then they outsource the job to recruiters, people who don't understand their soul. Yeah, so we have everything involved in this program. What allows for this to be broken is we're applying the very simple process of buying stuff to the immensely complex process of engaging with other human beings. And the result is it sucks for everybody. And the good news is, in understanding how this is broken, you can manipulate the system. And this is really the key in this work because the odds are stacked well against you. One quick question. Anybody got one at this point? Awesome. We're going to keep going then. All right, so let's talk about the brokenness. Companies use these tools called applicant tracking system. Anyone here done any recruiting or in a hiring position? Yeah. So they use these because they have a flood of applicants that are coming in. And if you've ever had to review resumes, after looking at about 20 of them, you want to stick needles in your eye. It creates this, and usually because it is so easy to apply, that you start to see these resumes and they're horrible, most of them, because people can, I'm a fry cook, I'm going to apply to a job as a data analyst because that's what I want, but not what I'm capable of doing. So you see 50 or so fry cook analysts, fry cook folks, and then you see one who's marginally okay, and he looks really sexy, right? So you have this horrible problem of the process of reviewing resumes. So they have these applicant tracking systems that bring it down to a manageable amount. So average job nowadays is about 300 applicants. It provides the recruiter on that job with about 30 of the most qualified people. Except that applicant tracking system is doing a really crappy job of screening those people out. Yeah. Harvard Business Review did a study where they were shocked that applicant tracking system were using random criteria to screen out candidates. For example, data entry job. You don't have a computer science degree, you're out. Now, I don't have a computer science degree, but I'm pretty sure I can handle data entry. Yeah, it's a random criteria, not to find the greatest candidate, but to make the job of the recruiter manageable. That's it. So walking into the gate, you're submitting your resume, the odds are stacked against you. And for those of us who are over 50, we're going to face a tremendous ageism in that process. Why? Because the person reviewing those 30 resumes is 22, maybe 23. And when you are 50, a 23-year-old looks at you like you're 1,000, right? Yeah, so right away, that person is negatively predisposed to you. And then they are only taking about 5 or 6 of those 30 resumes to send on to the hiring manager, and maybe 3 or 4 of them are getting interviews. So you have 300, down to 1. It's a lot of competition you've got to fight for. And the applicant tracking system, if you don't have the exact words on your resume that are in the job description, it's not going to work. They're going to screen you out, even if it's the same thing. And the people reviewing that 23-year-old kid, they don't understand the job either. So they're just doing a slightly better version of what that applicant tracking system is. Not necessarily. Exactly. Yeah. It's and this is endemic. And I've seen this time and time again as a recruiter, submitting candidates who get rejected because they don't have the experience, but it's just a different language. Yes.
More of a comment, but there was a study that showed some of the applicant tracking systems, if you mentioned lacrosse in your resume, that you're more likely to get selected.
Yeah, there's actually a friend of mine is a researcher, and he was asked by a big bank, he won't tell me which one, but he said what they wanted to do is what are the leadership traits that are consistent with this organization? And what they found is you've played lacrosse at a Northeastern university, right? So we're replicating systems that are been broken for years just to keep existing power structures in place. But the thing to recognize is job postings. It's not how people are hired. Only about 15 to 30% of jobs are filled through postings. And 70% of jobs are filled through networking. So why is all of our attention on job postings? The analogy I like to give, it's like you're walking down the street at night and you see somebody in a parking lot under the light of the one street lamp in the parking lot, and they're frantically looking around. And they're looking, and they're like, hey, are you okay? Can I help? Yeah, I lost my keys, and I can't find. Great, I'll help you find your keys. Did you lose them here? No. Why are you looking here? Well, this is where the light is. So why do we apply to postings when we all know that it's a friggin' black hole? Because that's where the light is. That's where you can see there is a job. But as many of you are starting to suspect, not really. A lot of those jobs are required to post. Yeah, so people will post a job because they have to, but they've already identified a candidate through networking. And they just need to bring that candidate through this fake process, getting your hopes up and making you work with them.
I'm sorry, I have
Yeah.
a question on that. I've also heard that our companies will post jobs to look good to their shareholders and everything like that, like the company is growing. Is that true?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I have no direct experience with that, but there's all sorts of reasons.
They would post jobs that are there.
You're not people to them. You are product. But how do you get out of that product-people relationship? You create relationships. So I'm going to just give you just a few tips on networking and submitting your job. So real quick thing on resume writing. You need to match the job description pretty perfectly. Use AI models to do it. It's a pretty simple thing to do. Always have 2 resumes. A very simple text-based resume that you're submitting to online jobs, and then a nicer looking one that you hand during an interview. The applicant tracking systems don't do well with highly formatted resumes, so it's one thing that will just screw you up. Yes?
I actually have a resume saved on my computer that has everything in it, and I call it my everything bagel resume. Then I can share it from it to.
Fill in the blank what it is that they're looking for. That's a great practice. I like that a lot. If I do this again, I will mention. Thank you. So you want to make sure that is net, but also if only 15 to 30% of get filled through postings, only spend 15 to 30% of search time submitting to applicants. And if you are going to submit, you need to augment it with a networking strategy. So let's talk a little bit about that. So networking, right? Most people view networking asking strangers to do crap for you, right? Yeah, but that's not what it is. You need to think about networking as a savings account, that you are making deposits into that account so that you can pull those deposits at a later. And those transactions can happen really close together. And we're going to talk about some strategies with that. So one of my favorite job seeking strategies is the referral bonus strategy. So many companies offer an internal referral bonus. So if you can find someone, and if you're using LinkedIn, a secondary connection who works at a company that you're applying to, and you reach out to these people who are strangers and say, hey, I noticed that your company has an opening. Is there a referral bonus? And if so, would it benefit you if you submitted my resume? Imagine this. You're sitting there minding your own business, and a stranger says, hey, can you just send an email for me and you might get $3,000? Bang your hands together if you would take that. Just me? Yeah. It's a really simple, so this is just a really simple way to let someone who you are not connected with, that you are looking to provide value for them. And so if you are using this process, that's a great way to augment it. And even if they don't provide a referral bonus, yeah, then engage them with conversation. You've already said, hey, I'm willing to provide you with benefits. Yeah. And they say, no, we don't do that. Would it make a difference for me if you were able to submit my resume? Yeah, this is a tactic that I've used several times. I had a brief period of time where I was coaching senior executives who dread going to work in the morning and want more from their career. It definitely works. And the other thing too is with networking, you need to start creating conversations with people who are in your area of interest. So anyone here looking to do a massive career change? Yeah, so it's friggin' hard. Yeah, and I think one thing to understand that it's hard and have expectations. And I'm saying this because when I left the staffing industry, I took a period of about 5 years in the wilderness trying to figure out how to accomplish what I'm doing. Yeah, now I have some real challenges when it comes to being employed. Mainly, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 24 years old, and I'm now at the point where I'm unemployable. Yeah, so it's a little, I don't expect it will take 5 years for everyone, but for me, definitely that's how long it took. But you want to know that it's going to take a while for you to do this. And the key is start having conversations with people who are experts in that area. And the trick is the first thing hiring managers do when they have an opening, when there's a problem that can only be solved by bringing on a new human being to their organization, is the very first thing that is uttered is not, let's call the recruiter and put a posting on LinkedIn. No, that's the last thing they do. The very first thing they do is say, who do we know? So your job is to be mentioned in that conversation. Who do we know? And you begin that by providing value to people who have the knowledge and the connections that you want. So let's just talk about some methods that you can use to do that. So first and foremost, the best method, I think, is to create a job for you, a company. So what you do is you look at your industry or the industry that you want to get into, and you identify a problem that is coming that other people can see, and you try and figure out how to solve that problem. And you reach out to people who may hire you, and you say, hey, you're in this industry. Do you see this problem coming? Because I've been thinking about it a lot, and I have some ideas, and I'd love to run them by you and see if they make sense to you. Now, if that person sees that problem and they're worried about it, they are much more likely to take that call, even if it's coming from a stranger. And this will give you an opportunity to provide your perspective, your interest to someone who is going to be facing that problem. They will remember that. Now, if the problem is big enough and your solution is big enough, one very likely possibility is, can you fix this for us? And when you do that, you come into a very different conversation. Instead of, what's the salary that we're willing to pay for this? You can ask for information about what is the resolution of this problem worth to this organization. It allows you to be able to write your own salary. Yeah, if you're solving a $10 million problem, a $400,000 salary is a pretty good deal. Right? Yeah. Now, but there ain't no employer who's going to say, you start with a salary like that. Because you understand the value and what you can bring and how you can solve that problem, yeah, you are able to command a higher rate. And you're doing so before they've thought about the problem, as they've put their own value to it. So this is a very powerful method and very, very useful. One quick question? Yeah.
I like all this advice, but I'm wondering for someone in a situation like me where my entire network is essentially unemployed and looking for jobs, is there any additional or different advice that you would suggest? And where really my industry is gone. So when I say I'm looking in a new industry, it's a forced pivot.
I don't have any advice for you, but I can give you reactions to what it says. Might that be helpful?
Sure.
Forget about the forced pivot. And really start spending some time to think about, what do you want to do? What would be exciting for you? Forget about what your background is. Just start with what's interesting to you. What are the problems that this world is facing that you're most interested in solving? And start talking to people who are involved in that space. Because if you're in spinach processing and you hate it, and then you have to look into kale processing, your ability to be effective, one, in networking with the kale processing professionals is going to be very limited because you don't give a crap. And two, it's just going to be painful for you. So you're just not going to want to do that. It's going to create a lot of drag on you. But if pig breeding is what turns you on and you're really excited about pig breeding, gosh, go talk to the pig breeders of the world and be excited about that and start paying attention to what's emerging for you, what you find interesting in your research on pig breeding, in your conversations with pig breeding experts, and start to follow those paths. It's not the easy solution, it's not, and the key for you is to grow your network, not with a group of unemployed who are facing the same way, but people who are working in areas that you want to be in and that you can start to gain information from and learn about. And not many people do this, but I'm a big LinkedIn guy, which is not going to speak to all of you, but LinkedIn allows you to do about 100 connection requests a week. Max that shit out. Excuse my French. If you're in a job search, you want to look for making 10 to 20 a day, targeting people that you're looking for, making sure that you go into your LinkedIn invitations on a pretty regular basis and delete everybody who's over 3 months old. Why? Because LinkedIn gets a little nervous about how many connection requests you are. And so if you have way too many that people aren't responding to, they don't like it. I don't quite know how they weigh the things that LinkedIn does. It's just good practice to keep that. And it also helps you from running up against limits because there is some flexibility in those limits.
And so just for the premium,
I don't know.
I think it's just premium.
Maybe.
As far as sending out 100 connection requests, I think that's what premium. I don't think you can do that with just the free version.
They'll let you know that. But if they do, go delete some old connection requests and see if that gives you more for a week. But you want to be making those connections. And the other thing that you can provide of value, and a lot of people when they're approaching networks say, what is it that I can provide? I'm out of work, I'm looking for work, I'm miserable in my job. Yeah, your network is very valuable. So offering to make introductions. So whenever you have a conversation, and I talk to at least 3 strangers, if not more, every week. People who I meet on LinkedIn. Actually, 2 of my greatest friends right now come from exactly that. That question that I end with, all of those conversations, tell me about the types of people who are going to advance your work. Who do you need to know to help with your career? Now, I know a lot of people. Yeah, so often when someone says, I need a pig breeder, I can point to Jack, who's been a pig breeder in Europe for decades now, and he knows everything about making swine purple. So I can quickly make those connections. And the beautiful thing is Jack, the purple swine geneticist, is grateful that I've made this new connection to them. So now I get to talk to Jack, a European purple swine geneticist, and tap into his network. Now, in addition to this person who I've just met, who's grateful for that introduction and will feel obligated to return the favor. They might not do it, but that's just the way it works. And then you want to keep an Excel spreadsheet of these people you're talking to. Just send them a note every 3 months. Now, just stay fresh with those people. Very, very valuable. Any questions about networking?
You touched on it just now, like sending them a note every 3 months, but like I was wondering, like, how do you revive a great connection that you haven't reached out to in a year? Are they gone forever?
No, not at all. Not at all. Hey, Chris, last year we had a conversation about X, and it was a lot of fun. For whatever reason, your name slipped through the cracks, but I just ran into a mutual connection of ours on LinkedIn, and it reminded me of that great conversation. I thought I'd reach out. Would you like to touch base? Yeah. Most of the stuff that keeps you from networking is stuff you knew. And if you burned a bridge, like by not responding, yeah, that might be in your head and it might not. But the trick, how do you find out, is you reach out. And if they say, stuff it, pound sand, I don't want to talk to you ever again because you ghosted me, there you go. Now you know. Yeah, but I wouldn't worry about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If you have connections and you're like, I have no idea who this person is now and like where I met them, what context, do you think you should just delete them as a connection?
Definitely not. And here's why. Particularly a connection on LinkedIn, it doesn't really matter if you know them. Yeah, LinkedIn, you can't have more than 30,000 connections. If you're close to that, then definitely delete them. But if you're not, then anyone you're connected to is going to vastly expand your ability to connect with secondary connections. Yeah, so just 3 connections can add hundreds of people to your ability to search for folks. Yeah, so connections are very valuable. Connections in your area of focus are even more valuable. But it doesn't mean that connections outside of your area of focus aren't going to be connected with people inside your area of focus. And I don't have time to get into it, but networking science really means that you have to go out in order to go in. So if you're very focused, I only want to talk to the pig breeders, you're actually going to have a much more difficult time connecting with lots of pig breeders as opposed to taking a couple steps back.
So by the same token, if somebody tries to connect with you and they don't send you a note by way of introduction, you don't really know who they are, except maybe you see 1 or 2 mutual connections, should you accept it?
Maybe. So I think, what is this person's motivation? Are they looking to sell you crap? Yeah. And are the people that are looking to sell crap to people you might want to talk to? Yeah. If the answer is yes, they want to sell you crap, and the answer is yes, that they're connected to people you might want to talk to, definitely take the connection. And they'll say, hey, you want to buy my crap? And you just say, nope, I do not. Yeah. And you forget about it. But now you have access to all of those connections. And that's the valuable part. I get a lot of very beautiful Chinese women with no connection requests asking me to be a mentor. I definitely say no to those folks. Yeah, but definitely be judicious. Is this person's network likely to offer value for me? That is the key question with that. Does that make sense? And the metrics you might want to think with that is how many introductions am I making on a weekly basis? Yeah, generally I'm doing at least 3 every week, if not a hell of a lot more to do that. And when you're doing introductions, make the people feel great. Don't just say, hey, Frank, meet Bob. No. Frank, I want to tell you about Bob. Bob is a mensch. I met Bob 5 years ago, and he did these great things for me. And I'm so impressed by his ability to do this. And I really think that this is awesome about him. And do the same thing for the other people. So when they read that, they think, wow, I'm amazing. And this other person is awesome. Yeah, it's very, very helpful. Any questions? Okay. So I think you want to talk about interviews real quick. I can give a quick rundown. So the format of interviews is the vast majority of people who are interviewing you have no clue how to interview. And so there's about 4 different interview methodologies that they use. So there's the skill base, There's the walk me through your resume, there's the conversational interview, and then there's behavioral based interview. Now, I have a little bit of a primer at the end of a QR code so you can get this emailed to you. So I'm happy to have offline conversations about this with anyone. But the skill-based resume. Have you ever used X tool? Do you know how to use Y tool? These types of questions that are focused on a very specific skill. The answers that most people give, yes, no, or maybe. Yes, I've used it at my last job. Always followed by, but I can learn, but I've done something similar. Or, did a little bit of that a long time ago. At best, all of these three answers are insufficient, if not disastrous. So, the yes, I did it in my last job. You're feeding there what they need to know. Yeah, you've done it. They don't know if you've done it well. You could have sucked at it. They have no idea. So it doesn't, but they don't know how to interview, so they can't ask follow-up questions. So they're just gonna sit there and be uncertain about you. The no, think about it. If I hire you and I don't know how to do pivot tables in Excel, and I don't wanna learn, and I really need you to know how to do pivot tables in Excel, and I've just spent 30 minutes with you talking to you, and then suddenly you tell me that you don't know how to do pivot tables in Excel. How do I feel? Frustrated, right? And who am I going to attribute that frustration to? You. So just by saying no, you piss them off on some level. And then you say, but they're pissed off. So they're not listening. So it doesn't matter what you say after no, because they're not listening. And the maybe, I did that a long time ago. They're not hearing that as did a long time ago. They're hearing it as no. And you have the same thing. So here's the process for dealing with skill-based interview. Step one, what is the concern behind the question? Step two, make a bold statement that addresses that concern. And step three, give a specific example that backs up that bold statement. So if I'm asking you, or you're asking me, have you ever used pivot tables in Excel? Is the concern that you have that my past usage of pivot tables, or is it that I will be able to use pivot tables when I get a new job? What do you think it is? It's the latter, right? But know this, the concern that the interviewer has is not necessarily pointed in the direction where the question points. Yeah, so take a moment and think about what is the concern behind this question. A couple things. Always, if you're doing a Zoom interview, have a water bottle or a glass of water with you, right? Anybody been to stand-up comedy? Yeah, 10-minute set. Every frigging stand-up comic has a bottle of water. I'm confident that they will not die of thirst in that 10-minute set. Why are they using it? It's a natural pause. Use the prop. Yeah, use the prop. If you're interviewing in person and they say, can I get you some water or something to drink, right? We all say, oh no, I don't want to be a bother. No, accept the hospitality. You're subtly saying, I deserve your hospitality and I'm going to take it. And then use it as a prompt. Give yourself time to think, what is the concern? Yeah, politicians in a debate, why do they take a sip of water right after a question? No, they're using the prompt. Use it as well. Identify the concern. And if that's one thing that you do at the end of an interview question is think about what's required, you'll be well ahead of everybody else. And then you make a bold statement. So if I don't know pivot tables with Excel, the bold statement might be, pivot tables will not be a problem for me. Yeah, I am adept at technology and I'm highly resourceful. Let me give you an example. It's a very different, and so that concern is put aside. Now, with my example that has nothing to do with pivot tables Excel, but more focused on how I was quickly able to learn a new piece of technology, it may not be effective, but it'll be more effective than you know. Yeah. Make sense? Okay, walk me through your resume interview. This is really important. People think it is an opportunity to go into their elevator pitch about everything that we think is great about ourselves. It's not. Your interviewer does not care about you, your product at this stage. So, read the job description and tell the story of your resume through the lens of that job description, right? Yeah, that's how you deal with that. The conversational interview. How many of you in an interview where someone just talks at you for 20 minutes and really just, Very difficult. The type of person who's going to talk at you for half an hour, right, is not a person who wants to be interrupted, but you need to talk about yourself. So how do you handle this? You ask them questions. Your questions communicate a lot about who you are and what you're thinking, but they're going to answer those questions. So with those answers, you're finding out what's important to them. And when you identify something that you think is really important, just call to it. Saying, it sounds like teamwork's really important in this culture. I don't know if you're interested, but I have a lot of experience growing teams. Let me know if you'd like to hear about it. You've asked the question. Yeah, it said something about you. You've elicited an answer. You've identified that answer as important, and then you've connected with it in some way. They may not need any more of this, but that's how you do that. And the behavioral-based interview, anybody did an interview where tell me about a time when? Yeah. Basic philosophy, it's how we behave is what allows us to be successful. This is the philosophy behind health clubs. Health clubs advertise to people who do not have the behavior of regular exercise, and they pay and they charge a low amount, so you're willing to continue paying even if you're not using it. Yeah.
Hold on, 5 minutes, but I have a question. So as an interviewer, what is the value of giving like a behavioral question ahead of time versus in the moment? Because I've done both where I want an actual valuable answer from this person. So I want them to see the question, but then under pressure, it's like you might not actually get a good glimpse of who they are because they're panicking.
So I would do something in between with that. And I think if you are looking at a job description and they're listing 7 or 8 behaviors, must be adaptable, good team player, but then you want to come up with specific examples for those things. So I think I wouldn't say here are the questions I'm going to ask, but let them know the behaviors that are important to you. And so with behavior-based interview, what's the behavior they're looking for? That's the first thing you want to, what's the behavior? And then pick an example where you are a rock star exhibiting that behavior. Describe the situation, describe why it required the behavior, and describe what you did to save the day. Yeah. And your Q&A. Ask people, remember, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. You hear that? Know that person doesn't know what the heck they're talking about, right? Everything that comes out of your mouth during an interview is informing their decision to hire you or not. So only ask questions that promote your candidacy. What I call rock star questions. Questions that give you insight on how to do a good job. Tell me about the people who are most successful here. Tell me what you need to see from me to know that I'm doing a great job within the first week, month, 3 months. Things like that will give you. Now, when they give you an offer, that's when you have time to interview you, because they switch from trying to determine if you're a good fit to trying to enroll you. That's the time is the question. You cannot decide if you want a job that you don't have. Get the job, ask the questions later. We're going to questions. I have this QR code. It's this tool that I use to talk it up. It'll ask for your email if you want the code, and it'll email you it's just a little primer on this interview test. It'll ask you some questions on what you thought of my presentation, and that's pretty much that.